Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here, and thank you to Charity Village for having me.
We're so glad that you could join us. We're looking forward to the presentation today, Nicole.
Thank you. So I'm good to go from here?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, hello, everyone who's joining us from the comfort and safety of your own home. I hope you are all in good health and that your loved ones and colleagues and the people you care for are accounted for. Thanking you all and sending you all positive, healthy vibes. So I've authored 4 of the new Charity Village e-learning modules: case for support, proposal writing, grant seeking, and corporate sponsorship. And when I was asked to participate in the webinar series, I thought I would broaden the conversation topic to something that I've really been tuning into over the last few years, and then more importantly, these last few months with our new COVID reality. And that is really focusing on how we as fundraisers, as community builders, as community champions, how we ourselves are so much more than that. We are in fact cause influencers. So that's what I want to spend the next 45 minutes with you here today. Just before I give you the quick hello and who am I do want to note I have a spelling error in counselor, which shows well on me, but there's an extra R there in the city councillor of town of Coburg, which is my quaint, beautiful hometown in Ontario. We're about an hour east of Toronto. Really quickly about me, I have been running my own consultancy for over 10 years. I was formally trained in the development sector in healthcare and higher ed. I spent 4 years overseas where I got into social entrepreneurship. And then since relocating to my hometown of Coburg, I've brought in my practice into rural development and community improvement initiatives. And most recently, thrilled to that I've joined as an associate with Kathy Mann and Associates and her new project, the Fundraising Lab, in an effort to leverage the impact that I've been able to achieve with various social change organizations throughout my career. And as you can tell by my bicycle, I thoroughly enjoy riding my pixie there around town. So more than ever, fundraisers, community developers, and nonprofit sector practitioners, this pandemic, I'm sure you're all feeling it, but it's really, to me, it's showing to the charities I work for and represent, as well as my colleagues in this space, that our efforts and our passion has never been more important than it is now. So I've curated our session today in a few different sections. I'm trying to keep this as a guided framework. This isn't masterclass level content. I'm really hoping to kind of touch on how I have been seeing how the sector has been impacted and shifted over the last 2 months. And then shedding some light onto where I think we as community influencers can help shape this new reality in 2020 and beyond. So that's kind of the gist of our conversation. I'm going to share with you some COVID confessionals, what I'm hearing from the front line and from sector leaders. I'm going to touch on some influencer trends that were starting to percolate pre-COVID and then have kind of lit up as a result of the pandemic. We're going to talk about how we as fundraisers and change agents can be our own 007. Then we're going to talk about how through some influential marketing and social influence that we can elevate our engagement, and particularly as it intersects with donor cultivation and community outreach. And then we're going to really talk about how it's really about us showing up these days and how our village of ours is really where the heart is and where we can achieve the most positive impact. And then I'm going to hopefully leave you with some sage advice and some motivation to reassure you that even though times are really tough right now, again, we haven't lost sight of our core mandate as fundraisers, which is to continue to raise money for an organization that we really care about. So our conversation today, as I mentioned, what I really want us to get into the headspace for the next 40 minutes or so is that when I talk about community influencers, I'm actually talking about you, the individual, you, the superhero human that is sitting on this call today. Because really the theme is that we're focusing on your influence to mobilize this support, not necessarily that A-list celebrity endorsement for a lot of us, especially if we're the middle to smaller agencies, sometimes feel a little bit unattainable. So I'm really coming at you from the perspective of how we are micro influencers and how we're going to find that niche narrative in a very, very noisy and busy climate. I found this, I'm sure like a lot of you, you've heard lately, you know, we're all weathering the same storm, but we're in a different boat, or we're rowing our own boat. And I found this from the Kids Help phone line. They published 30 inspirational quotes that can be used in some social media engagement. And I want to acknowledge that we're all in the same storm, no doubt, and we might be in bigger boats, smaller boats. You might feel like your boat is sinking. You might feel that you've done some patchwork and you just have a very small leak. Or maybe you have so many life-saving rafts around you that you are treading water just fine. But our commonality, our fabric as fundraisers in this space is, I think we can all mutually agree that we're influencing positive change regardless of that current climate. And I think I can speak for many people on this webinar that that has never been more real than it is now in 2020. So what am I hearing both as a volunteer, a donor, a researcher, a consultant, a counselor, a member of board of directors, an author? These are kind of the things I'm hearing from working with my clients, by doing follow-up calls with people I know in the sector, sitting on webinars such as this, and my own reading and shifting. So this is what I've been hearing since COVID has come to town, and I'm sure a lot of this will resonate with you. If not, maybe it's some additional things to take note of. So first, as we all felt in March and continue to feel that aftermath every day, is those sector shockwaves. What does that mean for me and my cause? I'm sure we are experiencing layoffs, if not reduced services. Maybe there's been a pause in your fundraising. Maybe you've been experiencing donor attrition as your donors are falling on financial hardships. Perhaps you and your board more than ever are actually seeing that silver lining in all of this, and new and innovative opportunities the seedlings are being planted, and that's something we're going to talk about in a few slides. Perhaps this is, I know definitely with one of my projects currently, it was a really kind of a punch in the gut and wake up call for us to realize, hey, we don't have that contingency plan that everyone's always been talking about, whether that's a program contingency plan, and more importantly, that financial contingency plan, which is a good segue into that financial stress that can come with a disaster such as COVID-19. I'm sure many of us have seen our spring revenue completely wiped out, but at the same time, maybe you're also seeing this other interesting trend where maybe some of your appeals or your informal giving is performing the best it has ever had in the last few years, because especially here in Canadian philanthropy, I think there's nothing more true in when we really fall on hard times, more often than not, even those that still can't give continue to give. Possibly this has been a little bit of a shock. I know I've seen it with some of my colleagues, this nervousness or a timidness of almost kind of losing their fundraising confidence, and this shift in, I don't even want to ask, is it even appropriate right now? So I'm going to try and pepper throughout the rest of our time together some tips and tricks that I think that you can use to keep that giving influence relative, even if what you're focusing on right now is cultivation and stewardship. I think the one thing I know that I'm constantly reminding myself and those that I intersect with is now's not the time to hide. Now's not the time to go completely silent, because we want to be there when this passes. We want to be there as the economy starts reopening. We want to be there during the recovery. And regardless of whether we want to be there or not, there's no timeline to this. And so we all need to start getting on with our lives. And a lot of that is also means making sure that we are keeping our mission relevant. Some of you might have seen over the last month, Tom Foolery, he's a British poet and someone I've come to really enjoy following online. His YouTube video, his spoken word lullaby to children, The Great Realization, has gone viral over the last few months. And I was flipping back through that as I was preparing for this webinar, because while obviously it makes you pause and think about COVID and the world before and the world we want to steward moving forward, it got me thinking about what was our sector before COVID and how can we anticipate what it will be afterwards, and what role can I play to keep that, to influence a healthy recovery, healthy engagement. And you know what, I have to be honest, I think I got really caught up in a digital world for a very long time. And what those last 2 months have really shown me as a leader and as a fundraiser is word of mouth and face-to-face, and that human connection really, really is at the core of the line of the work that we do. Adaptability. We're going to talk in a few moments about how you can use your influence to cultivate communication with your community and your donors. And I really, really want to underline, hopefully one of the themes you're going to hear from me in the rest of our time together is about how to engage with empathy. Again, that goes back to that scenario I opened up with about how we're all in the same storm, but different boats. I don't know the hardships you and your organization are going through just as much as you don't know what me and my clients are going through. But where we do connect on this is it's a really hard time right now. And when your job is to ask for money, it's even harder. I don't think it's grim, but it feels pretty good to be honest, being like, you know what? Not a fun time right now. But like all of us, I think we thrive and rise when challenge calls. So I think that leads to resiliency. We have to be resilient enough not to rely on the generous government emergency aid from all levels of government that are supporting our sector. And we all have to continue to navigate that climate to understand where are the blind spots in our communities. What gap can we fill? What gap is in our own mission? And how do we have to pivot? And we're going to talk about that pandemic pivot a little bit more later on. But really, I think as we head into warmer climate and as we follow the trajectory of the reopening of our economies in our respective communities, really, we're going to have to keep a pulse on where can we best exercise our influence. Where are we going to land? What story are we going to tell? And how do we narrate this to not only to maintain that culture of philanthropy internally, but how we continue to vibrate that through our external networks as well. Which brings me to sustainability. Again, I think this comes back from lessons learned if, we didn't have a contingency plan, or that contingency plan that we've had on a shelf collecting dust over the years, that's what it would look like when implemented. But I think we're all still responding and being reactionary. I don't know how many times I have ripped up my interim work plan only because the next day something changes, and whether that's the continuum of the outbreak or just keeping pace, keeping pulse with the ever-changing world of not only the government's announcements and direction, but how we're watching our clients that we support, and then more importantly, how we're trying to keep up with that shift and shaping in both funders and donor priority. So if that's what we're hearing, kind of the current landscape is, I'm sure you can all add 101 additional confessionals to that. And at the end, if you have a confessional that you just want to get off your chest, I encourage you to put that in the chat box, because I would love to hear from other people knowing that, you know what, this is a hard time, but I'm enduring. So what does that mean as to where 2020 is taking us? Well, if you know, I would love to hear. But in my somewhat makeshift of a crystal ball, this is what I'm forecasting, as well as what some of the sector and social science researchers and kind of leading firms in trying to forecast trends in nonprofit and the charitable world is kind of going. So I'm not going to read each section word for word. I've just kind of put together a few comments on these 4 themes of trust and value, trying to be a real-time human in kind of a mandated digital world. I think more than ever, really finding that niche narrative. And then we're going to talk a little bit about social personalities. So trust and value, what I'm seeing now in the ask culture, especially during the time of disaster fundraising or now pandemic fundraising, opinions do matter. And this comes back to your personality. You're an ambassador. You are an extension of your brand. It's so easy in this time to be political and anxious and fired up and emotional. And I think we all just need to take stock of our own online engagement and our own where we're present in online conversations, because I think those opinions matter. Deliberate dialogue and intentional engagement, I think, can come back to reflect on us. And I know that you all have your own social media policies that your organizations probably guide you online. But I think that's just important to acknowledge that our opinions are going to matter in this, and that's going to affect our reputation, not only with our donors, but our broader community that engage and rely on our organizations. Peer-to-peer leveled up. I know of dozens of charities that are being exposed to new networks and new donors. Probably, you know, acquisition has possibly never been higher in almost the last decade, and that's due to maybe 2 reasons. They're filling a blind spot that never existed before, or they've come up with some innovative adaptation to serve their clients in COVID. And donors want to be heroes. They really want to get behind these causes that are supporting the front line. So, and that peer-to-peer is really leveling up. And I think that just goes again to show in having a trusted brand, the value that can come with that. And then I think any influential marketing webinar, whether it's for the charitable sector or advertising, is going to leave you with, you know, that challenge to make sure that, you know, you're being authentic and transparent and really putting forward the best version of yourself and the best version of your organization. So then how do you engage, and how do we live in a digital community that was already extremely noisy and crowded pre-COVID? And I think a lot of it comes down to not trying to be on every platform. You're going to know what social media channels, what websites, what virtual communities best work for your cause or your sector or your network. But most importantly, I think you want to still monitor that efficient distribution. One statistic I found really interesting when putting this together is in the last 2 months alone, Canadian charities are experiencing that 40% of people are leaving or unfollowing Twitter accounts just because they're going on these endless rants. They're losing their mission mojo, and they're really not relevant to their core anymore. So I think that efficient and intentional distribution of how you participate, what you post, the content you generate, I think those trends are leveling up, but still apply even in the chaos of a pandemic climate. I think quality over quantity was already on the rise before COVID hit, and I find that really, really refreshing. I've never really been one to measure my social media engagement, whether it's myself as a professional or for my causes, on likes or sharing. I think they've kind of lost their significance. And I think more that quality over quantity really comes from that what you are posting, what you are trying to influence is really a sense of importance, that you're doing something important. And I think you would read any social personality or social influencing blog, encyclopedia, report these days that really talks about 10 quality followers. That niche micro community is going to be so much more effective and impactful than if you have a million non-responsive followers. Think about it, about how you would want to invite your most intimate loved ones to a celebration. That's kind of what it is with being a fundraising influencer, is you really want to impact and engage with those that are going to go from a like and a share and taking up cause, taking up action with you. So that's a little bit about that niche narrative. Really finding your virtual voice, using your words, using your content, using video, using really good quality photography. Please, when you can, use real content from your organization. Stock photos are of a like. Even yesterday, the day before, I went through across the country just for my own interest, and I found the same image used in different ways 33 times, which is fine, but I think we lose sight of who's behind the cause, and I think that's where you as a fundraiser, some of us are camera shy, some of us love being in the spotlight, but I think it's really, really important that you yourself, the humans of your organization, I know that there's sensitivity around clients and such, but staff and the leadership and volunteers and donors, get in front of that camera, make that 15-second IG story, go on that live Facebook stream, share why you gave, do that interview, cross promote your personal life with your fundraising life, because I think we really do fall in love with the people, the people behind the purpose, essentially. And to that point, I think that that trust and value. Another interesting statistic I found in Canada this year alone is that in addition to 40% of Canadians leaving Twitter because of rants and rage, 56% of people are unfollowing charities if they feel that they are doing unethical activity or sharing unethical messages that are off brand or borderline entering that controversial zone. So I think that's just that bit of that mission check, that reality check when we are curating our content. And I think how so important it is. The one thing I always say to a staff member, a volunteer, a donor, a board member is, please use a script when you are when you are recording or writing, make sure that your messaging, that script or that editorial is approved by your communications or marketing team if you have it. And if you are doing a live stream or an off-the-cuff live social video, maybe rehearse it before or pause and know when to wrap it up. So then again, just the last trend I think that is really kind of to form in 2020 are social personalities. And like I said at the beginning, the perspective of this conversation was really to be speaking to you about how you as the individual, whether you like it or not, the moment you became a fundraiser, you made a commitment to being a storyteller, to being a relationship manager, and believe it or not, an influencer. And I think that's really because there's a sense in real people doing real work. And those relationships that you cultivate with your cause and what you're providing out into the world, I think that's what's really bringing a sense of relief and a sense of connection as we're all, together, even though we're apart. And I think more than ever, your personality and the passion for what you do is going to be very, very relevant. And another reason why donors and volunteers in your community continue to look to you and aspire to be committed to you to renew their giving once their reality enables them to. So with all that said, that's a lot to digest, but how do we become our own 007? How do we go from being an exhausted fundraiser? I swear, if I was on video right now, you would see the bags under my eyes. Like I said, this has been hard, but it has also been humbling, and it has been beautiful. And it really has been that great realization of the community cares about their civic sector. It really is the third and fourth sector that make the world go round. So many of the frontline heroes are the backbones of your organization, and your organizations are the cornerstone of your communities. So with that said, I wrote down when I was putting this together something I always ask myself, which is interesting because I've never seen a James Bond movie, so I don't know why I love the Bond reference. But I always ask myself, Nicole, how can you be your own Bond today? How are you going to be your own superhero? How are you going to be that fearless change agent that's not going to hide under a pillow because the world is a really hard place right now? And I think what that comes down to is I know I do this work because my community raised me. I spent a lot of time in my life getting away from home, and I spent a lot of my adult life coming back home. And the fact that I get to not only do what I love, live where I love, and give what I love, I think I do what I do because I had a community that raised me. And I think a lot of you fall into fundraising very much the same way. I don't think this is something we grow up wanting to be. I don't think this is something we really go to school for. And fun fact, you fall into fundraising because you have a really big heart. And if you have a really big heart, that means you have a really big, beautiful personality. And even for the introverts, what social media does allow us to do is it can give us the confidence to connect without that real-time face-to-face anxiety that sometimes we experience. So that social personalities, that influence that you have, whether it's from designing a program to mobilizing a volunteer network around you, or maybe you got a successful gift in recent time, you're good at what you're doing, and you're noteworthy because of that homegrown and the nature of the impact of your success. And so I sometimes think fundraisers are, we're not doctors, we're not truck drivers, we're not grocery clerks. 99.9% of us are probably sitting at the comfort of their own homes, doing a big bang Sheldon right now where we're wearing our pajamas, to a professional development session. But, I think David Bowie, famous for saying we can all be heroes just for one day. But I think when you commit your life to influencing change for a cause you believe in, I think that merits a round of applause, that we are in fact heroes every day. And your mission really now is raising money to keep your frontline heroes safe and at work. Your mission, your superpower right now is mobilizing positive impact so that the people that you support can continue to be fed, so that the women who are still at home in a violent situation can still find a safe haven, so that you can still get people to where they're going in safe transportation, so that you can still support those rescued animals, find a safe home when this is all over. Whatever your mandate is, you have the glorious responsibility of ensuring that there's still, you're the light at the end of the tunnel, I guess is what I'm trying to communicate. And what I just wanted to spend a moment on is I came across some brilliant research around how social change agencies can create real and everlasting change after COVID-19, because especially if you're not in that relief or the response mode in the sector, a lot of us are continuing to cultivate and steward and build that capacity for when the recovering and the rehabilitation and the rebuilding of our communities is required. And I think what I don't know for you and your organizations, but I know one thing that I'm taking myself and my clients and my own charities that I've started through is kind of a 4-step planning process to really find where our influence can be the strongest. My favorite activity in this is that obsolete activity. So really identifying and the ability to stop doing the things that just distracted you or kept you busy before the pandemic. There's some blessing in pausing activity, and I don't mean blessing in the financial hardships and anxiety that comes with this, or the wait list that is growing, or the demand on your services. But it is an opportunity for us to divert capacity. It is an opportunity for us to see community over competition. Some of my favorite stories that I read daily in the news is when one charity is coming to the rescue of another charity, or people are cross-referring donors, or cost-sharing measures, or they're gifting of a stock of resources, even if though that means that in 3 months' time they might be at risk of a low inventory. Like there's no ego in this. There's no boundaries. It literally is a whole hand-on deck reaction, and that influence in leading by example, and that influence is driven by the humans. There's no putting of the hand up. It's initiative driven. And I think that's happening because, as that great realization video reminds us, is when we pause and reflect, wow, do we ever really take stock of what's important to us? But then we're going to start getting into temporary measures and then the innovative measures. So the opportunity to be immediate and be responsive, while also being long-term and strategically thinking about that opportunity for experimentation. And then where does that experiment take us? How do we evolve from experiment into everlasting change? And I guess really what I'm saying in this part of the presentation is all in. The decisions we make now are going to influence, or the decisions we make now are going to inform the influence that we create now during COVID and well beyond the pandemic. So let's talk about how we can level up, how we can elevate your engagement in what seems otherwise sometimes is a very exhausting time. Again, just a quick reminder, maybe you're scrolling on your phone right now or an email's coming up, or maybe I've lost you over the last 20 minutes. I just want to remind you that in fundraising, influence isn't based on those number of likes or how many shares your post got. It really is about that meaningful engagement and that effective networking to help you raise money. And as sure as Taylor Swift would probably say, you know, how some things never go out of style, that whole adage of people give to people, I think that's more than ever when it comes to pandemic philanthropy. So I'm just going to spend a few moments walking us through, I think, 3 key elements of engagement. If any of you have been involved in any type of basic marketing, direct engagement, events, we all know that there's kind of three key pillars in engagement when it comes to fundraising. That's identifying and connecting with our audience, how we go about raising awareness, and then more importantly, the action that we want to inspire through all of this. So it's no surprise that especially when using digital tools and trying to affect influence through those various mediums, we really want to connect with not only our core network, but that external community, that external audience that we're trying to infiltrate with really meaningful and decent intentional content, especially now as people are feeling overwhelmed. If we go back to those 2 statistics, 40% of Twitter users are choosing not to follow organizations or causes anymore because of too much content, or on Instagram, people are leaving or unfollowing because of unauthentic or unethical content. So now that we're home and we're in front of our screens even more, if that was even possible, we're choosing our content. And as fundraisers, as the curators of those stories, as the decision makers in what content and what stories and what narrative we put forward to donors, we have to use our influence in working with copywriters and decision makers, you know, to be really, really truthful and really, really honest with ourselves of what we're publishing. Is that bringing value? We want to look at virtual community building. A lot of us were already doing that before COVID. You know, we all hold space, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, or on LinkedIn, Snapchat, whichever your social media of preference was. I also hope that you were still doing real-time, face-to-face, good old-fashioned, one-on-one connection with your donors, whether it was phone calls or meetings, especially if you are in a major gift culture or have a major gift program. And I think one of the interesting things, and I know one of the things I've been contacted the most about, is coaching and helping fundraisers how to do digital networking. So the etiquette of hosting a donor solicitation, that thoughtfulness and how to connect with the donor when you know you still have to steward, but you also want to be mindful that it's not the appropriate time to ask. And then how do you go about still creating that connection, whether you're doing it through Zoom or Skype or Google Hangouts or over the phone? And then how do we raise that awareness? So we've decided what content we want to put out. We've decided who's going to say what and who we need to reach. But how do we continue to build awareness even with this lingering COVID cloud over us? I don't know about you, but I can definitely attest to the fact that the content I'm putting out, my own messaging, what I'm participating in, what I'm working on with clients is completely different than it was in March. I think, you know, as we got into April, we all realized that we were in this for the long haul, or we're always going to be learning how to coexist with COVID. And so this has been an opportunity for us to get back at what we're really great at, and that's telling the stories of our mission, of connecting with our donors, of using that influence to continue to build that culture of philanthropy around our organization. And one thing that kind of my rinse repeat is story, steward, solicit. And I know earlier what we said in the COVID confessionals is, I've heard from so many people, a quick phone call and it's like, Nick, I can't, I want to hide. I don't think it's appropriate to ask for money right now. And to a certain extent, I do agree with that. And usually what I leave the conversation with is, then you know what, just continue to tell really good stories. Continue to steward your donors. Let them know how you're doing. Let them know how your charity has adapted. Let them know who you're helping. And share what you need. I think sometimes we underestimate our donors. I think our donors are a lot smarter than we are. And I think really, especially, if you've been a part of disaster fundraising in the past, more than ever, when the world has bottomed out, what is it that people want to do? They want to help. And that's where as our superhero, what our superpower is, it's that influence of ours. And so how do we, if all we have is now, how do we call on action? What is that message in a very, very moody, scary, unknown, confusing world that COVID has exposed us to? Well, I think most part, it's actually kind of neat what we can still be together even while we're apart. We can still offer experiences in a digital platform. It's definitely not the same as being in person. But possibly yourselves have already started how you're adapting physical events to digital or virtual experiences. Maybe yourself have already started having board meetings. Maybe you've hosted your AGM, or maybe you've connected with colleagues, or maybe you've started networking with your donors online. And maybe you're like me. I had an analog childhood, a digital adulthood. I cannot remember the last time I made so many phone calls. But two things in the phone call revival that I've realized: my personality shines even more than it does on social media and in email. And the really cool thing about phone calls, everything that Fundraising 101 has been telling you for decades is people really remember that human touch. Your donor will remember that phone call, because while everyone else was sending blanketed emails or they were mindlessly scrolling through social media, they're going to end their day and remember, oh, you know what? Nicole Beatty called me today just to ask me how I was doing. And that's where the relationship part of our work comes in, that influence to not only raise money, but that influence to support and care for our donors. And then if you're looking for some really fun, heartfelt 2020 ways of how fundraisers and community influencers are, channeling and inspiring good work. If you're not already following the hashtag COVID kindness, I suggest you do. I've found it to be my most influential and my favorite hashtag. It's being used across various sectors, but in the charitable sector, it's been really linked to donor empathy and community storytelling. And so I suggest you start using that, or if at the very least start following it to hopefully to continue to inspire beyond our conversation together today. So just a few more, and then I'm going to hand it back over for questions. So community for the win. That village of yours is, or that village of mine is one of my favorite saying these days. And really, again, what it is about, it's that backyard philanthropy, that neighborhood philanthropy, the champion and support that you're finding in your neighbors to strengthen your nonprofit, the strength and support that you're finding from your colleagues. And then your community is no doubt your cause, or your mission is your purpose. And how you harness that generosity, that's your strength to mobilize donor support and continued kindness. One of the things I found, I wrote in my professional diary last week when I was working on an article is, you know what, I think more than ever, kindness is actually one of our strongest assets. You yourself as a fundraiser, you help to fortify, you're going to help rebuild your communities as we get into that recovery phase. We are going to be those leaders of the response revolution. We want to continue to ask for help and influence people on how they can help, whether that's with time, compassion, or with a monetary donation. And more importantly, we want to continue, even in a very dark time, to shine that light on our social issue. So I'm going to leave you with, go on, raise that money. I don't expect you to call up your top 10 donors after this call, because again, we have to connect and steward with empathy. But it's not going to be easy, but continuing to raise money is necessary. And I, for one, have been completely impressed and extremely grateful for not only our levels of government's response to our sector, but how funders and donors are shifting as well. They're removing a lot of the barriers. They're being flexible. They've extended timelines. They've released endowed funds. And so our funders aren't hiding, and nor should we. So again, in continuing to fundraise, if you're still feeling stuck on, Nick, how do I get on with relationship building, on asking for those donations? I'm going to lead you with this. Remind you to lead with empathy. Make sure that you showcase your survival strategy, letting your donors with your voice that you're still here. Continue to cultivate and tell your brilliant story. And don't worry, your donors are going to be there for you as you navigate your cause. And the reason why they're going to stay here with you is because your cause hasn't left the people that you care for before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. So in closing, I'd just like to thank you all for being here. I'd like to thank you all for committing your careers to being fundraisers. You are my hero. And one of my favorite closing lines has always been that philanthropy is a result of passionate perseverance. And my darlings, we have never had to be more patient or more perseverant than ever before. And remember that you yourself are your cause's very own celebrity, champion, and change maker.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole. What a great presentation. I want to just quickly note, Nicole has put the information on her slide deck here, and I've popped it into the chat box, that we are very pleased that Nicole authored 4 of our fundraising online courses. And for all of you participating in today's webinar, we are offering a $20 discount on any of our online courses. We have 13 to choose from. You'll see the discount code is there as well, and I've put the link in the chat box in case you want to browse those courses. So Nicole, let's jump right into questions. You know, lots of people, it was really resonating with a lot of people, the phone call revival. But the questions that were coming in were based around, if you have never done phone calls before at your organization, how do you start now and have it seem genuine and not just related to COVID?
I think that's a really important question. I think I am hearing 2 things in that question. One is, especially in a digital world where we may not even have donors' phone numbers. And if you don't, one thing I'm seeing, and I've worked on with one project, is actually sending out a note saying, you know, as we've pivoted in COVID, you know, if you want to submit your phone number, because we are adapting the way that we stay in touch. And then along the lines of the genuity question, I think I think where you would be inauthentic is if you made the phone call, hi, I'm Nicole Beatty, I'm following up with you, and oh, by the way, it's time to renew your 2019 gift. I know I would hang up on that phone call, but I think where you're being genuine is, especially with a more senior donor population, my answer to that is that wellness check-in call, the genuine, hi, I'm Nicole from one of the charities that you've supported over the years. And during this time, it's, I'm calling to reach out and to say hello and just seeing how you're doing. And then let the conversation go from there. There's no agenda. Your only goal in that phone call is to say hello and ask how they are.
That's great advice. And a follow-up question to that, should we try to Zoom with our donors, or are phone calls the best way to begin?
I think I'm one of those people that consent in all aspects is really, really important. I've found if you're someone who frequently communicates with your donors, and this is more probably for those who have individual philanthropy or major gift portfolios or stewardship portfolio, at this point, you're going to know your donor contact preference. But again, I've seen some organizations even do a quick donor survey to ask them to how would you like to be communicated and networked with during this time, and Zoom or that video conferencing is one of the options that they're putting on the survey, and then they're able to update their donor contact preferences as a reflection of the input from the donors.
Yeah, consent is such a key aspect for sure. Going way back in your presentation, you were talking early on about scripts and the importance of having a script. So first of all, are we talking mainly for interviews, videos, social media? Where should people focus on having scripts available?
I think if the phone, I'm going to break that up into, and thank you for that question. I'm going to break that up into two quick responses. The first is if you're doing on the phone, I would have some guided questions for you so that you achieve that genuity and you sound natural. But I don't mean a script as if you would, for a typical telemarketing call. But then in terms of when I was talking about a script, I really was meaning for video production, or even just before you yourself, maybe you're giving a video message that day instead of a static post. And the reason why I say that is you see a lot of blunders, a lot of awkward pauses. And I think the reason why the script is so important, it goes back to what I was talking about, building trust and value and being on brand. If your organization is lucky enough to have the resources where you have a marketer or a content manager or a communications officer, that extra 10 minutes with that person to help with the narrative, I think is really going to work. And if it's just yourself, type it out ahead of time. I always at least do 2 or 3 practices before I go live. I record myself a few times. It's funny how it sometimes can take 20 minutes for that 30 seconds. But your followers are smart, and they want authentic content, but they also want smart and sophisticated content as well.
And as we're running up on time here, I think we'll follow up on just one last question that I'm quite certain impacts many, many people on our call today. How do you fundraise if your programs have been postponed and really your organization doesn't have a lot else going on right now?
I think that's really important. I think most people would echo the same response where that's, I think, where stewardship is going to be really, really important to you. Think of all the communication that you've been putting off and that pause activity that I was talking about. I think that's where those organizations fit in. But then I think a lot of this is, if you're in that pause mode, this is a brilliant time, that gift of time, where you can really start working on capacity building efforts. And then I think that's where are you on that continuum? And if you are in the recovery, the rebuilding, the when life gets back to normal phase, you want to be ready to go in action and be live, because when you resume and your donors have the ability to resume with you, you want to make sure that they're still engaged with you, that you're not going to experience attrition after the fact. Because just because you're idle right now, the rest of the world isn't. So I think that's where that, if you take the story, steward, and solicit trifecta that I like to use, I think that storytelling and that stewardship during that pause activity is where you're really going to shine.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for a wonderful presentation. We were so happy to have you here. Did you have any final comments you wanted to make before we end off today's webinar?
No, just my email and social handles are there. I know we can't get through everything in an hour. I just, thank you to everyone. These are hard times. These are humbling times. You know what to do best. Follow your intuition. And if you have any conversation or questions, or you just want to have a conversation, I really do mean it. Give me a phone call, send me a text, or send me a DM. But thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's wonderful. Thank you, Nicole. As Nicole mentioned earlier, she did author 4 of our fundraising courses, and we do have those available online with the $20 discount. I hope you'll take a moment to browse those. We have 13 available courses altogether. Take advantage of the discount, which is only available until May 18th. We will follow up with you by email this afternoon, or latest by tomorrow morning, with the webinar recording and the slide deck. You can also check the landing page for this webinar as well. If you don't see that email, the link to the landing page will have the recording available on it. There will be a short survey in the email that we send out that will take less than 5 minutes to fill out. I hope you'll complete that. You'll have an opportunity there to let us know if there's other topics you'd like to see covered in a future session, and we'll also share your feedback with Nicole. I'd like to remind you all that Charity Village has a wealth of resources available to you, including our dedicated COVID-19 resource page. In addition to the course discount we're extending to you as a participant in today's webinar, I will also mention that our job postings are currently available at a 15% discount until May 31st. As always, you can post your volunteer positions and your events, including virtual events, on our site for free. On behalf of Charity Village, thank you so much for joining us today. We do host dozens of free webinars every year, and we do hope to see you at more of our sessions this spring. Our next free webinar will be held next week, Thursday, May 14th. We'll have Volunteer Canada discussing volunteer management during the COVID-19 crisis. And we will include a link in the email that we send later today in case you'd like to register. Thank you again for taking part in today's webinar. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Stay well, everyone. Bye-bye.